The moment she laughed in my face was the moment everything I believed about my life shattered. Delaney didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there flawless in her tailored silk blouse, wine glass in hand, and laughed when I showed her the messages. Not the kind of laugh you give when you're nervous or caught. No, it was the cruel, unbothered laugh of someone who had already decided that your pain no longer mattered. "You were always too slow to catch on," she said, tapping her nails against the rim of her glass like she was bored. "Jax makes me feel alive. You were just the safe option. I don't remember dropping the phone. I only remember Harper's drawing falling out of my briefcase, her crayon-scribbled words. 'Daddy, you're my hero.' And in that instant, it wasn't the cheating that broke me. It was knowing she was right there in the next room, and Delaney didn't care. About me. About Harper. About the family we built. It wasn't a clean break. It was a slow collapse. And I took the fall alone. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. It was a Friday afternoon when I learned that my marriage had been over long before I realized it. Delaney's voice barely quivered as she said it. "You deserve to know the truth, Ethan." Her tone was calm, clinical, even like she was delivering lab results, not tearing apart 15 years of a life we built together. I sat frozen at the edge of our sectional couch, still holding the receipts I'd printed from her work email. Flights to San Francisco that never showed up on our credit card, spa bookings that didn't match her calendar, restaurant reservations under her maiden name. Jax's name was on all of them. "You don't get to be shocked," she added, as if she were scolding a dog for tracking mud across the floor. "You haven't touched me in over a year. What did you think was going to happen?" I didn't respond. Couldn't. My heart was pounding so hard it made it difficult to breathe. I looked over at the sliding glass door where Harper's pink backpack hung off the chair she always claimed at breakfast. She was 9, and she'd be home from school in 20 minutes. She still thought we were the good kind of family, the bedtime stories kind. The Sunday pancake kind. The kind where Daddy makes her lunch and Mommy smiles at him when he kisses her goodbye. Instead, Delaney sipped a glass of Pinot Noir at 3 in the afternoon, fresh from a shower that didn't smell like her usual lavender shampoo. "Jax makes me feel seen. You just check boxes." I stood up slowly, blood draining from my limbs like I'd been underwater too long. "So that's it?" I asked, barely hearing myself. "You blow up everything and I'm just supposed to—" "What?" "Sign the papers and vanish." Delaney looked at me with that same cold detachment she used on employees at her quarterly reviews. "You've been coasting, Ethan. People like you don't survive in my world. You're just now realizing that." Her phone buzzed and lit up with a message. Jax. I saw his name. She didn't even bother to turn it over. I remember blinking down at the phone in her hand, then the wedding photo still framed on the wall above the piano. I took it down. Not angrily, just methodically. I didn't want Harper to see it anymore. Didn't want her asking why Mommy had her arm wrapped around Daddy like she actually meant it. As I walked toward the foyer, I tripped over something soft. Harper's unicorn hoodie. I picked it up, held it for a second longer than I needed to, then folded it over my forearm, like it was the last gentle thing I had left in the world. "You can stay in the guest house," Delaney said flatly. "I've already spoken with a lawyer. We'll work out visitation. I turned back. She's not a timeshare Delaney. Her lips curled into a smirk that made my stomach churn. She's also not yours biologically. I stopped breathing. What did you just say? Delaney raised a brow like I'd misheard. You heard me. But I couldn't process it, not then. The rage, confusion, betrayal, they all collapsed into one dull ache at the base of my neck. I stumbled out the door, hoodie still in hand, into the driveway. We had landscaped together the summer Harper was born. I made it to my truck keys, trembling in my palm. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there looking at the house, our house, and the woman inside it, now pacing with her phone to her ear, laughing. I didn't know where to go. I just knew I couldn't stay. That night I stayed at a Holiday Inn 10 miles away. Harper called me crying because Delaney told her I had business stuff. I told her I loved her. I told her I missed her. I told her I'd be home soon. But I didn't believe it myself. The next morning I took a walk by the marina. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just walked until I found myself staring at the community arts center Harper had joined 2 months earlier. She'd drawn a lopsided dog there and named it Mr. Fudge. Luca, the program director, had helped her blend the colors. He saw me through the glass, paused, then stepped outside. Ethan. Right. I nodded, unsure why I was even standing there. You look like someone who hasn't had coffee or hope in a while, he said gently. Come in. I followed him inside. The studio was empty, sunlight catching the paint jars on the shelf like stained glass windows. It felt warm, safe. I told him everything, not because I planned to, but because he didn't interrupt me once. When I was done, he didn't offer cliches, just said, "You're not the first man to be blindsided, but you might be the first who still has a shot to do this the right way." I didn't know what he meant until he asked, "Do you want to fight for Harper?" That was the moment it shifted. Not the betrayal, not the humiliation, but the quiet realization that I could still be her father, even if biology didn't back me up. I nodded. Yeah, I'll fight. He smiled. Then let's start today. The first few days after I moved into the guest house felt like drifting inside a memory that wasn't mine anymore. It was the same property, same palm-lined driveway, same scent of orange blossoms in the spring breeze. But everything had changed. The main house, once ours, now felt like enemy territory. I could still hear Harper's laughter echo in my head from the weekends we'd spend building pillow forts or watching old Pixar movies until she fell asleep with popcorn in her lap. Now, I was allowed to see her on Delaney's terms. Terms outlined in a temporary custody agreement I never agreed to, but was told to follow for now. Harper would come out to the guest house some afternoons after school. Those were the only moments I felt like I was still alive. She'd bring her sketch pad and snacks, and sit on the floor while I made tea or grilled cheese sandwiches the way she liked, burnt just slightly on one side for flavor, she always said. But even then, something in her had shifted. She smiled, sure, and she hugged me tight, but her questions had changed. Why aren't you in the big house anymore, Daddy? Are you and Mommy fighting? Did I do something bad? Each question sliced deeper than the last. I'd kneel in front of her and reassure her that none of this was her fault, that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. But even then I could see the confusion setting in. She didn't know who to trust. Delaney had started telling her that I was too busy with work to be around all the time, that I needed space. It was classic Delaney rewrite the narrative before anyone else gets to speak. And it was working. I'd never felt more powerless. That's when I started seeing Luca more often. At first it was incidental. He'd text me pictures of Harper's latest paintings from the center, short updates like, She asked for blue glitter paint today. Said it reminded her of you. Or she made a storybook about a dad who turns into a dragon to protect his daughter. It's beautiful. But eventually I found myself at the studio more than I ever expected. Not just because of Harper, but because of Luca's calm presence. He never pitied me. He never gave me advice I didn't ask for. He just let me be there. And slowly that space became the only one where I could breathe. "You look exhausted," he said one evening as we packed up some of the kids' canvases after class. "I am," I replied. "Delaney's playing chess, and I'm stuck in check with no board." He smiled faintly. "Then change the game." I scoffed. Easy for you to say. But that was when he said something that stuck. "What if we could change the optics? What if just for a little while we played her game better than she does?" I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, but only for a moment. "I have an idea. You're getting squeezed because you look unstable alone, recently displaced scrambling. But what if you weren't?" "I'm not following." "What if you weren't alone, Ethan?" I froze. "You're not suggesting—" "A fake relationship," he said calmly. "Strategic, public, for the courts, for Harper, for control of the narrative." I almost laughed. "You want me to pretend we're a couple?" He shrugged. "You don't need to shout it from rooftops. But if people start seeing you as someone building a stable new life with support, emotional and practical, it changes everything." I leaned back against the paint-stained table. Delaney would lose her mind. He nodded. "Exactly." We stood there in silence for a long time. I watched the twilight pour into the windows, lighting the dust particles like tiny stars. "Wouldn't that be misleading for Harper?" I finally asked. Luca turned to me. "Only if we lie to her. And I don't intend to. I care about her. I care about you. This isn't about faking love. It's about real support. She deserves to see a world where her dad isn't alone. And you, Ethan, you deserve a narrative that doesn't paint you as the abandoned one." That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the length of the guest house, replaying his words, the tone of his voice, the logic behind the madness. And maybe it was madness. But in a world where Delaney was building a case against me with lies, wasn't I allowed to build something too with truth, just packaged differently? The next morning I said yes. We didn't make any announcements. We didn't post photos or hold hands at school pickups. But Luca started showing up more often, dropping off Harper, staying for dinner, laughing at her corny knock-knock jokes, asking about her art. He became a fixture in our small world. And Delaney noticed. She called one night furious. "You've got some nerve bringing that man around our daughter." "Our daughter," I snapped. "You're suddenly feeling possessive." "This isn't a game, Ethan. You think this looks good in court? I think Harper deserves to be around people who don't lie to her every day." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then flatly, "You're making a mistake." I hung up. But it didn't stop her. The next week, I got a formal letter from her attorney demanding a review of the custody agreement due to questionable influences in Harper's life. I took the letter to Luca. He read it quietly, then looked up. "You ready to take this all the way?" "I'm not backing down," I said. And I meant it. We started documenting everything. Photos, witnesses, statements from Harper's school counselor about her mood when she returned from time with Delaney versus time with me. Luca even coordinated an art exhibition at the community center featuring Harper's work, giving her a spotlight she'd never known. At the exhibit, Harper ran up to me, gripping my hand. "Daddy, do you think Mom will come?" I hesitated. "I don't know, sweetie. She said she might. But she also said she doesn't like art that's messy." I smiled softly. then this might not be her thing. But Harper's face didn't fall. Instead, she looked at Luca, who was helping hang a framed watercolor she'd done of a castle in space. "I like it better when he's around," she whispered. I nodded. Me too. Delaney didn't show, but her lawyer did, lurking at the back of the gallery, pretending to be a friend of the community. We saw him. We didn't flinch. What mattered was Harper's smile as people clapped and complimented her work. She glowed. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about winning custody. This was about preserving her joy. About building a new world where she didn't have to question which version of love was real. At the end of the night, Luca and I packed up the canvases. Harper fell asleep in the back seat on the ride home, one hand still clutching the ribbon she'd won. "She's not just your daughter," Luca said quietly. "She's your legacy." I looked at him, emotion catching in my throat. "Thank you." He didn't respond, just reached over and placed a hand over mine. Delaney called again the next day. "This thing you're doing," she said sharply. "It won't work." "What thing is that?" "This pathetic attempt to look like the stable one, to win her over. It's fake." "Funny," I said. "That's what she used to say about our marriage." Press off. It was working. And Delaney was spiraling. I could see it in her rushed emails to the school, her panicked attempts to get Harper into therapy without telling me, her sudden interest in PTA meetings she never cared about before. She was losing control, and in the vacuum I was finally starting to breathe. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'd find next, because while organizing some of Harper's old paperwork for school, I found something I'd never seen before. A medical form from 4 years ago, blood type records. Harper's listed type didn't match mine or Delaney's. It wasn't close. It was genetically impossible. I didn't tell anyone that night. I just sat in the kitchen of the guest house staring at that form until the sun rose. And then I picked up my keys. It was time for the truth. The drive to the clinic where Harper's old records were filed was only 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a mistake, a typo, something I could laugh off and forget. But the gnawing in my gut said otherwise. I replayed the scene in my mind, Delaney handing over Harper to me in the hospital room, her face glowing with pride, her voice light and confident. She'd held Harper, first cooed softly into her ear, and told me she had my nose. I believed it. I wanted to believe it. We were so young, so full of possibility. I thought we were building something real, but I never asked questions. I never thought I had to. The nurse at the front desk was polite but stiff when I asked for the archived paternity and blood work records under my name. "Sorry, sir. I can't release anything without proof of guardianship or a court order." "I'm her father," I said. She paused, glancing at her screen, then back at me. "Mr. Hart, the documents here list another name under legal father at birth." I froze. "I'm listed on the birth certificate." "I understand. But the records from prenatal testing were not updated." I swallowed. "Who's listed?" She hesitated, then quietly pushed a sheet across the desk. I leaned down. "Jackson V. Reddick. Jax." I staggered back as if I'd been punched. My first thought wasn't anger. It was nausea. Cold, hard nausea that twisted my stomach into knots. Harper. My Harper. I don't remember walking back to the car. I don't remember starting the engine. All I remember is sitting in the driveway for over an hour staring at the wheel. My fingers wouldn't move. Delaney had lied to me every day for 7 years. And Jax. He'd stood beside me at Harper's 2nd birthday. He'd toasted to family at our housewarming party. He'd hugged me after our company sold and told me I deserved every damn good thing. I was living in a story written by someone else, and I'd been the fool reciting the lines. I didn't tell Harper. Not yet. I couldn't. Instead, I went to see Luca. He was still at the studio reorganizing materials from the week's classes. The place smelled like paint and eucalyptus. It always calmed me. He looked up the moment I stepped in. "You okay?" I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. "She's not mine." He froze. "What?" I choked on the words. The blood type mismatch wasn't a mistake. The hospital has it all. Jax is listed on the prenatal record. He was there, before I ever knew. Luca put the brush down. Jesus, I don't even know what's real anymore. He walked over, careful not to touch me until I was ready. "Do you want to sit?" I didn't answer. I just collapsed into the chair in the corner and buried my face in my hands. "I've been raising another man's child," I said. "Loving her, defending her, fighting for her. And now I don't even know if I have the right." Luca knelt beside me. "Ethan, listen to me. Biology doesn't make you a father. Harper loves you. You've been there. You've shown up. That's what matters. But what if she finds out? What if Delaney tells her just to hurt me? Or worse, what if Jax wants custody?" The fear in my voice cracked something inside me. Luca reached for my hand. "Then we fight. We fight harder than we ever have." I spent the weekend in a haze, unable to look at Harper, without wondering how much of her belonged to someone else. It was a cruel thing to feel, and I hated myself for it. But grief, I learned, has many faces, and one of them is doubt. Delaney, of course, didn't return any of my calls, not until I showed up at her doorstep unannounced. She opened the door halfway, clearly annoyed. "What do you want?" "You lied to me." Her face didn't change. "You'll have to be more specific." "Harper. Jax. The hospital records." She rolled her eyes. "So you finally figured it out." I felt my fist tighten at my side. "You let me believe she was mine. She is yours, Ethan. Don't get all dramatic. You think raising a kid is just about DNA. That's not your choice to make." She shrugged. "It was mine to survive. You weren't supposed to find out. But honestly, I'm not sorry. You were a better father than Jax ever would have been. And you're still useful." I stepped forward. "Don't ever call me that again." "Useful?" I nodded. "You don't get to decide the narrative anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "You think a court is going to side with you after this?" "I don't care about the court," I said. "I care about Harper, and I will burn every lie to the ground if it means protecting her from you." I turned to leave. "That man you're playing house with," she called after me. "Luca. Let's see how long he sticks around once it gets real." I didn't answer, because I knew something she didn't. Luca already had. That night I told Harper everything well, almost. I didn't mention Jax's name. Not yet. But I sat her down and explained that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. That sometimes the people who bring us into the world aren't the same ones who stay and build it with us. And that no matter what anyone said, I would never stop being her father. She listened quietly, her little fingers twisting the hem of her hoodie. Then she said, "You're still my favorite person." I nodded, holding back tears. "You're mine, too." The next few weeks were war. Delaney filed for full custody. She claimed emotional manipulation, mental instability, and exposure to alternative lifestyles, whatever the hell that meant. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. With Luca's help, and a relentless attorney who'd seen far worse in custody court, I built a case grounded in fact, not rage. Harper's school reports, teacher statements, her art therapist's input, even video clips of our daily routines. Every piece added weight. But the final blow came unexpectedly. One of Jax's former assistants reached out anonymously through a legal contact. He provided voice memos, dated texts, and photos evidence that Jax and Delaney had plotted the entire deception from the start, using my financial stability to shield their affair and future plans. It wasn't just adultery, it was fraud. And now it was going public. When Delaney was served, she didn't call. She didn't come by. She didn't try to explain. But Jax did. He showed up at the studio one night reeking of entitlement and cologne and tried to corner me in the parking lot. "She's my daughter," he spat. "She's Harper. That's all that matters. You think you're some kind of hero? You're a damn joke." I stepped closer. "Then why are you here begging for relevance?" He stared at me, breathing hard. "I won't disappear," he said. "No," I replied. "But you'll be irrelevant. Legally. Permanently." The trial was short. Once the evidence hit the table, Delaney's legal team backed down. Her claims unraveled. Her credibility shattered. I was awarded full custody, and a restraining order was granted against Jax. Harper, of course, didn't understand the legal details, but she knew one thing she didn't have to choose. She could just be a kid again. The first night back in the main house, she ran up to her old room and squealed. My bed still smells like marshmallows. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, breathless. Luca walked in behind me. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "It's just finally real." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did this." "No," I said, turning to him. "We did." Life didn't go back to normal, because the old normal was built on lies. This was something new. Harper started calling Luca bonus dad, a term she came up with on her own. He cried when she said it. Delaney moved out of state. Jax went silent. And me, I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted peace. And in the process, I found something better than closure. I found clarity. The headlines hit the tabloids before the court documents could cool. Tech angel, or scorned husband CEO Ethan Hart, wins custody in explosive trial. I didn't read the full articles, but I saw the photos. One of me carrying Harper outside the courthouse. Another of Delaney head-ducked sunglasses oversized trying to slip into a black SUV, while Jax trailed behind like a kicked dog. The media painted me as the stoic victor, the betrayed genius. They didn't know the half of it. But that wasn't the story I cared about. My story was Harper, her healing, her future. And if I had to tear through the last threads of silence to ensure her freedom from Delaney and Jax, then so be it. Still, the victory didn't feel clean, because trauma doesn't disappear when you win a court case. It lingers in the corners of a child's eyes, in the way she hesitates before hugging someone too tightly, in the middle of the night calls from her bedroom, whispering, "Daddy, are you still here?" I always answered yes, even when I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Luca and I tried to ease Harper back into normalcy. We kept morning's routine pancakes on Tuesdays, dance-off Fridays before school bedtime stories from her favorite fantasy book. She clung to us with a kind of wary hope, like someone who had seen too much and wasn't sure the good days would last. And then one day, she asked me what happened to Jax. I was folding laundry when she walked in with her arms crossed. "Is Jax still mad?" I paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because I saw him on Mommy's phone." He was yelling. My pulse slowed. "Where did you see that?" "She left her phone at school pickup. It lit up. I didn't mean to look. I sat down next to her." "What did he say?" "He said it wasn't over." I swallowed hard. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we safe?" I looked her in the eyes. "Yes. As long as I'm breathing, you're safe. But it wasn't just threats anymore. 3 days later, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, no body text, just a single attachment, a surveillance photo. Harper walking home from school, alone. My throat went dry. I checked the timestamp. That couldn't be right. She always left with Luca or one of our vetted nannies. I called Luca immediately. She never walked alone, he said, panic in his voice. I picked her up early that day. She had a dentist appointment. So how did they get this picture? He paused. You think someone staged it? I think someone wants me scared. Luca exhaled. We need to call security. We didn't wait. That night I hired a private firm. They swept our home, installed upgraded systems, and put a rotating detail on Harper's school route. I notified the principal and discreetly involved law enforcement, making sure it stayed out of the press. I wouldn't let this become more fodder for gossip columns. I just wanted her safe. But I knew this wasn't random. Delaney was spiraling, and Jax? He was desperate. When powerful men lose control, they get reckless. The next confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened at a gala. We were attending a fundraiser for foster youth education, an event Luca had supported for years. The ballroom at the Conrad Hotel glistened with crystal chandeliers and navy velvet curtains. It should have been a beautiful night. Until I saw them, Delaney and Jax standing by the bar pretending they belonged there. Jax smirked when he caught my eye. He raised his glass like we were old friends. Delaney looked thinner than usual, nervous, twitchy, her hands trembling around the stem of her wine glass. I walked Luca to the far side of the room. They're here. His eyes flicked toward them. They weren't on the guest list. They weren't invited. Luca's jaw tightened. What do we do? Nothing. I steadied my breath. We don't run. We don't engage. But Delaney had other plans. She approached us before dessert was even served. You look tired, she said, her voice too loud for the music. I sleep just fine, I replied. You always were good at pretending. And you were always good at lying. She leaned in. You think you've won. But Harper's not a trophy. She's a ticking time bomb. When she finds out who she really is, she knows who she is, I cut in. She's my daughter. She's loved. And she's nothing like you. Delaney flinched. Then she smiled. Let's see how long that lasts. She slipped away before I could say another word. Luca took my hand under the table. She's unraveling, I know. And Jax. I don't think he's the threat anymore. I was right. 2 weeks later, Jax was arrested. Not for harassment, not for fraud, but for insider trading. Apparently, his desperation extended beyond personal revenge. He'd been siphoning confidential data from multiple investors for over a year, hoping to recoup what he'd lost in the divorce fallout. He was caught trying to flee the country. The news broke fast. Former venture capital star Jackson Reddick indicted in SEC sting. Harper didn't ask questions about him again. But Delaney, she wasn't finished. She filed a petition for visitation supervised once a month. Claimed she was entering recovery, that she was ready to be a real mother. Her lawyer spun a polished narrative of redemption. But the judge didn't buy it. Neither did Harper's therapist, who testified that Harper's well-being depended on a stable, safe environment, and Delaney had done irreversible damage to that trust. The petition was denied. Delaney stormed out of the courtroom in tears. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Life after the storm felt quiet in a way that unnerved me. Luca and I moved Harper into a new school across the city, one that focused on creative learning and emotional growth. She made friends quickly, too quickly maybe, like she was trying to bury everything that came before. One night I found her writing a letter in her room. to who I asked. She shrugged. Myself. When I'm older. I sat beside her. What does it say? She handed it to me without a word. Dear future me, don't let anyone tell you who you are. Not even the people who say they love you. If someone lies to you, it's not your fault. You're not broken. And Daddy is always right. Real love doesn't leave. I didn't cry, not then. But later that night I stood outside her door and let it all fall out of me. Because children shouldn't have to write things like that. Luca and I never talked about marriage. Not seriously. We'd both been burned me by betrayal, him by abandonment. But there was something sacred in what we were building. A home, not made of promises, but proof. Still, one morning, Harper cornered us in the kitchen. Are you guys gonna get married or what? Luca nearly dropped the coffee pot. She rolled her eyes. You're already like married. You kiss and stuff. You argue about pillows. I laughed. That's what marriage is, huh? She nodded. Plus, I want cake. We looked at each other. And just like that, it didn't feel scary anymore. We got married in April. Nothing flashy. Just the three of us in a sun-drenched garden behind our house. Harper wore a floral crown she made herself. Luca cried through his vows. I barely managed mine. There were no photographers, no press. Just peace. Just love. I sometimes think back to the man I was before all of this. Before Delaney. Before Jax. Before the crash. He was naive, hopeful. He thought love meant trust, and trust meant permanence. But life taught me something else. Love is what's left after everything else is stripped away. It's the hand that holds yours in silence. The person who stands between you and the storm. The child who still calls you Dad, even when the world tries to say otherwise. I didn't lose. I just changed shape. And in doing so, I found the life I was meant to live. Not the one built on illusion, but the one built on truth. The day of the custody hearing arrived like a storm we'd been bracing for months. I woke before dawn, the weight of every confrontation, past and future, settling heavy in my chest. Harper was quiet in the next room, clutching her favorite stuffed owl eyes wide, with a mixture of hope and fear I couldn't bear to see. Luca was calm but tense, running through last-minute details on his phone. This wasn't just another courtroom drama. This was our lives on the line. The truth laid bare. The chance to finally sever the last ties to Delaney and the chaos she'd brought. The courthouse buzzed with sterile efficiency, the clack of heels on marble floors, the murmur of whispered conversations, the sharp scent of too strong coffee. Reporters lingered outside the doors, hungry for the next headline, the next scandal. I avoided them, clutching Harper's hand like a lifeline. Inside the courtroom, the judge's presence was imposing but fair, a woman whose eyes missed nothing. Delaney sat across from us, makeup perfectly applied to mask sleepless nights and raw nerves. Jax was nowhere to be seen, his recent legal troubles making his attendance unlikely. But Delaney's legal team was fierce, ready to tear through every piece of evidence, every character witness, to chip away at my credibility. The opening arguments were a blur of accusations, denials, and carefully crafted narratives. Delaney's lawyer painted me as unstable, unfit to care for a child who they argued needed consistency and maternal affection. I kept my face still, my voice measured when it was my turn. I have loved Harper since the moment she was born, I said, locking eyes with the judge. No DNA test can measure the bond we share. I'm here to protect her from harm and give her the stable, loving environment she deserves. The witnesses came next. Harper's teacher spoke of her recent progress, her happiness since returning to a safe home. The counselor testified to Harper's emotional resilience, but warned about the potential harm of further exposure to Delaney's manipulations. Then Luca stood up. He spoke not as a boyfriend or contract partner, but as a steadfast pillar in Harper's life, a mentor, a confidant, a friend. "Harper trusts Ethan implicitly," Luca said quietly. "And in my years working with children, I can say that trust is the foundation of her healing." But the turning point was yet to come. My attorney had a trump card, the hidden footage of Jax recorded during a court-ordered supervised visit. In it, Jax is seen belittling Harper, using threatening language, trying to coerce her to speak negatively about me. The room went silent as the video played on a large screen. Harper's small face, anxious and guarded, made my heart shatter all over again. Delaney's face twisted in anger and disbelief. The judge leaned forward. "Is this an accurate representation of your client's behavior as?" Carter Delaney's attorney stammered. "Objection, Your Honor. This footage is taken out of context." The judge shook her head. "I'll allow it as evidence. This court must consider the child's welfare above all." Then came Harper's moment. At first I thought she might freeze or clam up under the courtroom's watchful eyes. But when the counselor handed her a tablet showing her drawings, a visual diary she'd kept during the past year, Harper began to explain in her quiet voice. She pointed to a picture of a dark forest. "That's when Mommy and Jax yelled a lot." Another drawing showed a small figure hiding behind a tree. "That's me scared." She then smiled softly, looking directly at me. "But Daddy makes me feel safe, even when the world isn't." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Delaney's defense tried desperately to discredit Harper's testimony, claiming coaching emotional manipulation by me and Luca and fabrications. But the judge wasn't swayed. She saw through the charade. After hours of testimony, the judge rendered her verdict. Custody would be awarded solely to me. Delaney's visitation was severely restricted and only supervised contingent upon her undergoing therapy and rehabilitation. The restraining order against Jax was extended indefinitely. The courtroom was quiet, except for my ragged breathing. I looked over at Harper, who was holding Luca's hand tightly. She whispered, "We did it." Outside, reporters clamored for statements. I declined, wanting only to shield Harper from the chaos. Luca put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You fought for her like a warrior. I fought for her like a father," I corrected. The first night back in our home, Harper ran ahead, claiming her old bedroom with wide eyes. She pulled out her old owl plush and whispered to it, "We're safe now." I stood in the doorway, watching the small shadow jump on the bed, her laughter like music I never thought I'd hear again. Luca caught my eye and smiled. "This is just the beginning." Delaney vanished from our lives after the ruling, moving out of state and cutting contact. Jax's trial took months, ending with a conviction that sent him to prison for insider trading and child endangerment. The relief was overwhelming, but the scars remained. In the weeks that followed, Harper flourished. Schoolwork improved, friendships blossomed, and she no longer flinched at raised voices. Luca and I worked on rebuilding our home, both literally and figuratively. We painted her room soft colors, hung framed art she'd created during her therapy sessions, and built new traditions together. One afternoon, Harper tugged at my sleeve. "Daddy, can Luca be my uncle?" I smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Uncle Luca it is." Though the courtroom battles were over, healing was ongoing. I promised Harper and myself that no secret, no betrayal would ever come between us again. And every night before she slept, I whispered into the dark, "You are loved. You are safe. You are home. The months that followed the custody ruling were a strange blend of relief and reckoning. The courtroom battles were behind us, but the war was far from over. Healing took time, sometimes slow, sometimes brutal, and every day was a test of strength for Harper and me. Our home, once a battlefield of secrets and broken promises, was slowly becoming a sanctuary. The walls echoed less with arguments and more with laughter and music. Luca and I poured ourselves into creating that safe space, focused on rebuilding a life where Harper could thrive without fear or doubt. But outside our bubble, the shadows of the past loomed large. It began with whispers, quiet, at first subtle shifts in the business world, where Delaney's family wielded influence. Contracts delayed, meetings canceled without explanation, friendly competitors suddenly turning icy. The Myers Group felt the ripple. Though my focus was Harper and our family, I couldn't ignore the growing storm. My company, built painstakingly over years, was under attack. One evening, as Luca and I reviewed Harper's homework in the kitchen, my phone buzzed with an urgent message. "Ethan, we need to talk. Conference room. Now." I excused myself and stepped into the sleek glass tower downtown, the heart of the Myers empire. The room was already filled with my closest executives' faces, tight with concern. "Our latest deal with Avalon Technologies just fell through," the CFO said bluntly. "They're backing out, citing concerns about the Myers leadership." I felt the weight settle in my chest. "Any idea who's behind it?" The COO shook his head. "Nothing concrete but the timing. It lines up with the custody trial fallout. Delaney's family has deep pockets and long reach." I clenched my fists. "Then we fight back, harder." Meanwhile, Harper's world blossomed brighter. Her school performances improved. She made friends who saw her as just Harper, not the daughter of a scandal. Luca continued to be her steady rock, helping with art projects, coaching her through difficult days, and teaching her resilience. One afternoon, Harper tugged at my sleeve, eyes shining with excitement. "Daddy, guess what I got into the city's youth art competition?" I smiled, ruffling her hair. "That's amazing, kiddo. We're going to work on my piece this weekend. Luca said it's going to be the best one yet." I nodded, pride swelling. It was moments like these that reminded me why the fight was worth it. But the battle wasn't limited to boardrooms and schoolyards. Delaney wasn't finished. She launched a vicious public smear campaign using social media to spread rumors about my mental health parenting skills and even my relationship with Luca. Fake accounts posted doctored photos, malicious memes, and baseless accusations. It was relentless, and it aimed to destroy everything I was rebuilding. One night, Luca and I sat in the dim light of the living room, watching the toxic flood of comments and messages roll in. "I can't believe people believe this crap," Luca muttered, shaking his head. I rubbed my temples. "It's the price of being in the spotlight." "But it's hurting Harper," Luca said softly. I nodded. "That's what terrifies me most." Determined not to let the lies win, I arranged for a live interview with a reputable news outlet. I wanted to tell our story truthfully, openly, without the shadows Delaney tried to cast. The day of the interview, Harper was nervous but brave. She held my hand tightly as we walked into the studio, ready to face the world together. The interview was raw and real. I spoke about the betrayal, the custody fight, the struggle to keep Harper safe. Luca shared his perspective as a mentor and co-parent. And Harper. She spoke about her love for both of us, her hope for a peaceful future, and her determination to rise above the chaos. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from all over the country, parents who'd faced similar battles, children who found courage in Harper's story. Strangers who saw the power of love and resilience. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen not as a victim or a villain, but as a father fighting for his child. But as the light grew brighter, so did the shadows. A week after the interview aired, my office received an anonymous package. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Truth cuts deeper than lies. I hesitated before plugging it into my computer. What played on the screen shook me to my core. It was a video of Delaney and Jax meeting secretly with a prominent competitor of the Myers Group. The conversation was heated, discussing strategies to sabotage my business, leveraging inside information Delaney had access to during our marriage. They weren't just seeking revenge. They were aiming to dismantle everything I'd built. I shared the footage immediately with my legal team. "This is corporate espionage," my attorney said grimly, "and it's actionable." But I knew the battle ahead would be brutal. Delaney's next move was to file a lawsuit against me, claiming defamation and emotional distress from the interview. The media circus returned with a vengeance. The court battles tested me in ways the custody trial never had. Every allegation was dissected, every word twisted, every piece of evidence scrutinized. Delaney's team painted me as a ruthless businessman, willing to destroy anyone to protect his empire. But I stood firm, not just for my reputation, but for Harper's future. During the legal proceedings, Harper remained my constant anchor. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling day in court, I found her waiting for me in the studio. She ran into my arms and whispered, "Don't let them win, Daddy." I held her close. I won't. Ever. The trial dragged on for months. But with the new evidence and witness testimonies from trusted colleagues, the tide began to turn. Delaney's credibility continued to crumble under the weight of her own deceit. The lawsuit was dismissed. The competitor faced penalties for illegal dealings. And Delaney. Her attempts to regain control faltered. In the quiet moments, Luca and I reflected on the journey. We'd been through heartbreak, betrayal, and fierce battles. But through it all, we found strength in each other. One evening, as Harper slept peacefully upstairs, Luca looked at me and said, "You've won more than just custody, Ethan. You've reclaimed your life." I smiled, exhaustion and relief mingling. And it's just the beginning. The victory was sweet, but tempered by the scars left behind. Harper had lost a mother to lies and destruction, but she gained a father who would fight endlessly. A family built not by blood, but by choice. As the sun set over the city skyline, I stood on our balcony, Harper's laughter echoing from the garden below. I knew the road ahead would have challenges, but for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next, because no matter what, we were together. And that was all that mattered. The morning light streamed softly through the curtains, casting warm golden hues across the room. Harper was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, sketching with a focused intensity that never ceased to amaze me. Her art had become more than just a pastime. It was a language, a way for her to process everything she'd been through, and everything still ahead. I brewed coffee and poured a fresh cup, taking a seat beside her. She glanced up, smiled a smile that felt lighter, freer than I'd seen in years. "How do you feel?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then shrugged. "Happy. Safe. Like I belong." It struck me how much weight those words carried. For so long, belonging had been elusive. Between the betrayals, the legal battles, and the painful silences, she had been caught in a storm that no child should ever face. But now, with Luca and me by her side, she was learning what it meant to truly belong to family, to love, to home. That day, I took a moment for myself on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline was alive with promise, and I could almost believe in the endless possibilities the future held. Years ago, when I'd first fallen for Delaney, life had felt like a blank canvas waiting for colors and strokes. But now the painting was no longer tarnished by lies or deceit. It was vibrant and real. Luca joined me, his presence a steady reassurance. "You did it," he said quietly. "All of it." I shook my head. "We did it. Harper did it." He smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "She's lucky to have you." "Lucky is an understatement," I said. "She's our heart." The coming months were about growth and healing. Harper's art flourished and her confidence soared. She began participating in local exhibitions, her work gaining recognition for its raw emotion and vivid storytelling. It was a testament to her resilience and a reminder that even the darkest past could birth something beautiful. At home, Luca and I settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. We weren't just co-parents. We were partners, friends, and in many ways a family forged not by blood, but by choice and love. One evening, as Harper slept peacefully, Luca and I shared a quiet dinner. "I know this journey hasn't been easy," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But I'm grateful every day for you and for her." I squeezed his hand. "Me too." He smiled. "So what's next for us?" I took a deep breath. Building a life. Together. No more shadows. Luca's eyes softened. No more shadows. Our wedding wasn't a grand affair, it didn't need to be. Just a small ceremony in the garden behind our home, surrounded by close friends and family. Harper was the star beaming with joy as she placed the rings on our fingers. The day was filled with laughter, tears, and promises not just of love, but of unwavering commitment and strength. In the years that followed, challenges came and went, but the foundation we built remained unshakable. Harper thrived, graduating with honors and pursuing her passion for art at a prestigious university. Luca and I continued to grow, supporting each other through successes and setbacks. Most importantly, we healed. Looking back, I realized that what I thought was the end was actually a beginning. The betrayal, the pain, and the fight for custody were chapters in a story far greater, a story about resilience, love, and the power of family. And as I stand today watching Harper paint in her studio, I know that no matter what the future holds, we will face it together. Because we are more than survivors. We are victors. And our story is just beginning. Sometimes life's deepest wounds don't come with loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. They come in whispers, in silences, in the slow unraveling of trust and the weight of betrayal. Yet within those cracks there lies a fragile opportunity, the chance to reclaim what was lost, to rebuild not in anger or revenge, but with quiet strength and unyielding resolve. True victory isn't measured by trophies or titles. It is found in the courage to face the darkness, to stand firm when everything seems to fall apart, and to create a new foundation grounded in love, truth, and resilience. Healing is rarely a sudden event. It is a journey marked by small steps, steady decisions, and the unwavering commitment to protect what matters most, the bonds that define us beyond blood or circumstance. This story reminds us that no matter how deep the betrayal or how dark the path, there is always hope for a new beginning. The greatest triumph is living a life that no longer needs to be justified or explained. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. More stories of strength and hope are on the way.